Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics Football. It's Fran here, and I'm back with a new video and a new microphone, so I apologize for the lack of echo today. Um, but yeah, going into the game actually for Spurs and Tottenham, I think what's interesting about this game is the fact that in terms of FPL owners, the ownership percentage of a lot of the players across both teams is extremely low. And I think only a few players, such as Ramsdale, had been on people's watch lists due to the fact that Arsenal had been, accumulating clean sheets as of late. And of course, Ramsdale provides an opportunity to get a keeper for what you would consider to be a strong mid-table team, at a very, very cheap price. And I think White was the only kind of key asset. But I think after this game, we've seen once again potentially a start of a shift similar to last season where Arsenal were able to kind of capitalize on Chelsea, in that kind of derby. But here in the North London derby today, we'll be kind of reviewing the tactical analysis of the match and also considering, from a kind of watch list perspective, what is so interesting about some of the Arsenal assets and maybe even some of the Spurs assets as well, even though they had a very poor performance overall. Starting off the match, you were kind of expecting, I think, the general formations that we've seen so far from Arteta, which would have been the 4-2-3-1. The only kind of change in this system is the fact that instead of playing, Pepe on the right and Saka on the left, which I think obviously is a position that I think Saka is not as comfortable in. You finally saw Saka on the right and Pepe being dropped so that Emile Smithe-Rowe could play on the left wing. And this, of course, still accommodates for Odegaard being the 10 naturally in that formation. And I think what was so great about this formation is similar to what we saw last season, where Smith Rowe has a very good partnership with both Tierney and Aubameyang, and his ability to play on the wing and actually run across balls and then cut inside is key. Whereas Saka is someone who's very direct on the right, and not only is he kind of limited like Pepe is to cutting inside on the right, but he's also someone who can actually run directly through defenses due to the fact that he is not so hampered by his weak foot. And I'll explain more about why Saka is so interesting a little bit later. In terms of Spurs, they played with a very generic 4-3-3 formation. I think it was very, very imbalanced because you have both Ali and Ndombele in the midfield, and they're actually occupying, the left centre mid and right centre mid positions. And very often, I think they were not playing with any sort of midfield structure. I think when they're trying to defend, they were clearly playing this 4-3-3 with Højbjerg as that kind of sole DM. But it was clear that I think Ndombele doesn't thrive when he's not playing in the center. And I think he has to be your 10 in a formation if you want to play with him. Otherwise, he has a very, very quiet game and can't get involved because he doesn't really contribute much to closing down attacks on the wings. And he pretty much struggled to kind of close down Saka today, especially when Reguilon kind of overcommits towards the left hand side. And with Arsenal, of course, we know that there's always been this kind of gap in the system, in that left back position when Tierney overcommits. And I think what kind of changes that, to be honest, is the kind of inclusion of Partey back into the side. And that allows Xhaka to actually move into that kind of left back position at times. And Partey is a much better holding mid in terms of actually being able to kind of hold the shape. And I think what Arsenal's structure also shows in terms of how compact they have been in the last few games is the impact of Tomiyasu and what a transfer that has been for them. Because now Arsenal aren't very much limited to Tierney kind of exclusively pushing through the left. They now have an outlet in terms of the right hand side, and they have a nice little triangle forming with Thomas Partey, with Tomiyasu and Saka, and also Odegaard sometimes dropping a little bit deeper into that kind of right mid position to kind of supplement some of Arsenal's attacks. And I think when you actually look at, for example, Saka once again, who I mentioned, I mean, just look at the third goal, for example. I think that was a clear kind of example where Saka really thrives on the right hand position. And I think as an FPL asset, you might want to consider him, in the future if he continues to play in the structure. The issue, of course, is how Arteta maybe prioritizes someone like Pepe, because I think when Saka plays on the right, he's much more devastating in terms of goals and assists perspective, and you can see. He's able to either kind of look for passing opportunities and just generally be much more direct in terms of creating opportunities for himself. And of course, despite the fact that I think Tottenham had poor defense, kind of matching up with Saka today, I think he had quite an easy time, mostly due to the fact that Reguilon kind of overcommits on the left. I think clearly this is kind of a structural win for Arsenal, having Saka on the right and Emile Smith on the left. I would really like Arteta to stay in this structure. And not only does that, benefit Saka, it also benefits someone like Smith-Rowe, right? As we said, Smith-Rowe was someone who benefited a lot last season, when he was playing alongside Saka on the other wing. And I think what this formation shows is that Smith Rowe can also still drift as a 10 at times. And you'll see that because when Tierney actually is the more kind of aggressive kind of fullback, you'll see that he pushes up and Smith-Rowe will kind of run inside into that kind of 10 spot. And Odegaard will both occupy that spot with him, and Partey will kind of hold right behind them as they kind of attack inside the enemy's box. And Xhaka will be occupying much more deeper positions to make sure that he kind of covers that kind of gap if Arsenal get collapsed upon. And I think that's kind of the big change for Arsenal so far. In terms of Spurs, I think you can see how poor, conversely, their midfield was in terms of holding up the play and also dealing with the balls in the midfield in terms of loose balls and air balls. And you can see that in the making of the second goal. I think the second goal is a clear instance of where Ali clearly overcommits and pounces forward, and the same is done by Tanganga as well. Tanganga is someone who pushes forward, commits while watching the ball, but doesn't actually track the run of the player in behind. And as we know, his kind of target for the day is going to be Smith-Rowe, right, playing on the left hand side, and he kind of lets Smith-Rowe run by him, so that Smith-Rowe can kind of combine beautifully with Aubameyang. And I think Aubameyang had a fantastic game in terms of link up. It's not very often that I think we've seen that in recent times, but I think he had a fantastic game in terms of his touches today. And of course, that's exactly what allowed Smith-Rowe to actually run in behind and actually drop a beautiful cutback so that Aubameyang could actually place it perfectly into the net. And when it comes to talking about, for example, the strength of the Arsenal midfield with this kind of midfield three of Odegaard, Thomas Partey, and Xhaka, I think I have to say once again, I think there's a big little bit of a stark contrast between Thomas Partey and how instrumental he is to Arsenal's midfield. You can see he also provides slightly more kind of variety in terms of his passing and his display in terms of his creativity. You can see, for example, his kind of crossfield passes are there. Just like last season when he was kind of combining with Bellerin at times, he has the outlet pass there, whereas Sambi is someone who is much better at recycling the play and kind of keeping the tempo of the play, but doesn't go for so many kind of aggressive passes in terms of stretching the field of play, which is, I think, one of Arteta's kind of key tenets in terms of how he kind of pulls apart his opponents. On top of that, of course, you see the creativity from Partey here and this kind of very, very nice combining opportunity for Arsenal here. So a lot of the one-touch football can be done when he plays this specific formation. You can see Tomiyasu being relied upon on that right-back position, stretching the field of play, looking for a great pass to Partey, who looks for a beautiful backheel flick to Odegaard, who actually looks to recycle the ball and shift it out to the left-hand side, which allows for Tierney to drop a beautiful cross to Saka, who unfortunately, due to the fact that the cross being overhit, isn't able to capitalize on that. In terms of, let's say, Kane's game, I think as we look at, for example, some of the premium assets from Spurs and even Son, I think you have to say that I think Kane's form has been a bit poor. I mean, part of it too, I think, has to come down to confidence in his teammates, confidence in himself, and also whether he actually likes the place that he's in right now in Tottenham. And I think clearly he's not really enjoying his football, and that's pretty much what it comes down to. As a 12.1 mil asset, I would not be interested in Kane whatsoever. Not only is he not being able to kind of complete passes right now, I think he had a very poor game in terms of how he was able to retain the ball and kind of shift the ball towards his teammates. I think he just doesn't get enough touches in the system. With the exception to, I think, crosses, and corners, Kane doesn't really get much of the ball inside the box, and he barely receives any touches. He should still have finished an opportunity today where there was an over-the-top ball opportunity and he was able to run in behind, but actually kind of fails the dink over Ramsdale. And not only does that maybe highlight, how good Ramsdale is as a keeper in terms of actually closing down the space and forcing Kane to drop a good or a poor shot. I think Ramsdale's so interesting because as an FPL asset, I think this Arsenal side are still conceding shots, but not necessarily shots inside the box. I think he'll be able to kind of accumulate a lot of points through his saves, and that's very, very interesting for a 4.5 keeper. And the fact that I think in general with this kind of back four specifically, because I think a lot of people have to kind of understand that there's been a change in the back four. Gabriel was missing for a long part in time, and if you watched last season, you would know that he was clearly that kind of talismanic centre back that Arteta trusted to kind of guide and lead the defense. And Ben White is almost that off the ball piece who can support Gabriel, who's the more physical, more demanding centre back. And now with Tomiyasu, who actually can allow them to play outside the back as a three, with Ramsdale being a bit more comfortable on the ball as opposed to Leno, I think this kind of completes exactly what Arteta wants in terms of constantly wanting to pass out of the back. So that's pretty much how I see things right now with Arsenal. I think this formation specifically is very interesting. Now, Arteta could, of course, move away from it, and that would be less interesting from an FPL perspective. So I might even want to see another game of Arsenal before I really trust into moving into their assets. But I do think you should actually look at most of these pieces and put them on the watch list. When we go back to Son, to be honest, who's that kind of last premium for Spurs, I think he was the only kind of shining light in this game. I think Son was someone who, when he plays in the left mid position, can clearly drive versus most defenders in the league, and he does it with ease. And with Tomiyasu, I think the only kind of detriment to his play is the fact that maybe he's not the fastest player in the world, but he does commit himself a lot. And I think the difference between him and Chambers is the fact that he's very aggressive and he's very active. So he'll ask for the ball, demand for the ball, which means that Arsenal can finally stretch the field of play when they pass out of the back. And on top of that, he is very hungry in terms of closing down his kind of opponents. And so while sometimes he will make a mistake or two, I think he does, in a sense, still protect his Arsenal backline much better than Chambers, who was much more timid in terms of engaging some of his winger counterparts. Still, though, you can see Son drive, across the defense and actually crack a shot on goal. And that's just pretty much comes down to his individual prowess as a player. Nothing down to the fact that Spurs are a very poor side. I think Son can actually still create opportunities by himself. But I guess the question you'd be asking yourself in the future, even if Spurs have nice fixtures, is it worth it to have such a good asset, but him have the pieces around him that are so weak? Ultimately, though, Son was still able to actually get a goal in today, and I think part of it too was the fact that I think Arsenal were very happy to defend that lead, and the game had changed. I think with the effectiveness of Nuno's subs. Ultimately, I think when a side is guarding a 3-0 lead, you're probably their level is going to drop off, and that was clearly the case with Arsenal, with the exception to a few opportunities maybe started by Saka in the second half. But Son makes a beautiful kind of darting run inside the box, and he actually capitalizes on what was a Tomiyasu kind of overcommittal. So kind of going back to what I was saying just a little bit before, but that was pretty much the state of the game. I think when you look back, the only kind of interesting assets on my watch list now is someone like Tomiyasu. I don't really think Tomiyasu contributes that much to attack, where he's maybe worth it compared to Ben White. Ben White is still cheaper. He probably makes the most sense to have. He could maybe also have a header or two. He's obviously not the best aerial player, but I mean, still, that could be an opportunity for him to get onto the score sheet. In terms of Ramsdale, I think he's a fantastic kind of wildcard asset. I'm not sure if you want to directly swap into him or waste a transfer on him from Sanchez, but he really could be worth it, especially if he continues to play. And of course, we have that kind of Brighton Arsenal fixture coming up soon, so that might be an interesting opportunity to move into him. In terms of Smith-Rowe, he's at a 5.3 price. That's fantastic. He's even cheaper than someone like Mbeumo, who's quite pivotal. I think those two players I would arguably say are the kind of underrated 5.5 players who haven't hauled too much yet, but still have huge potentials for hauls in the future. And that's pretty much it, I think, for this video. I think we all know that Saka and Aubameyang are also, I think, the more kind of well-known names in Arsenal in terms of FPL assets. But I think there needs to be more to be seen in terms of whether Arteta stays within the structure before I'm actually confident in saying that Saka is going to be a great pickup. But I do think defensively, there's enough to say that Arsenal will probably get very fair returns, especially given the price of some of their players. And that's pretty much how I see things. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. And look and stay forward for the stay tuned rather, sorry, for the kind of game week review coming up after the Brighton game and the upcoming cheat sheet video and more. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely week ahead.